Well, this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while now. Welcome, everybody, to my little Intro to Japanese class. As a little bit of a disclaimer of sorts, this particular series, if I continue with it, is going to be heavily grammar-centric. I'm not really going to go into the writing system. There's a billion videos of that on YouTube, and I don't need to really regurgitate all that too much of, the same basic set phrases. So instead, I'm going to be throwing you all headfirst straight into grammar, and specifically in this video, one of the most important pieces of grammar that you will run across while learning this language. It is this fabulous little copula called des. Before we go any further, you're probably wondering, what the heck is a copula? Well, for those of you who do not know what a copula is a word whose function in grammar is to connect a subject to a complement. The best example of a copula in English, the language which I am currently speaking, is the verb to be. A really easy example of using the verb to be in a sentence would be, Julia is friendly. Is being the copula of the sentence. It connects Julia, the subject, to friendly, the complement. What this video is going to show you is how to use the Japanese equivalent of this in some very basic sentences. And luckily for you, it has pretty much the exact same use, and even there are instances which you don't need to use it at all. Now, if you're not familiar with Japanese grammar, well, you're in a bit of a doozy here, because Japanese grammar is almost nothing at all like English grammar. When jumping into Japanese, you need to know that it's a subject-object-verb word order, and not a subject-verb-object order like we do here in the English language. So the to be verb will always be at the end of the sentence, really it's the end of the clause, right? So whenever you hear the word des or any of its conjugated counterparts in any level of polite, impolite, or formal speaking, it's always going to be at the end, following a noun or an adjective. So right next to me here is this handy-dandy little couple of charts of every single conjugation of all of the conjugations in both the spoken and the written forms of the copula des. But don't worry, I don't have the time to talk about all of that right now because I'm using Flip-a-Clip. So for your sake and my sake, we're going to keep things simple, and we're just going to talk about those first couple of rows of conjugations. Now, one thing to note that might seem kind of interesting about Japanese is that we only have a present and a past listed and no future. That's because in Japanese you only have a past tense and a non-past tense. So you have words that either have already happened in the past or verbs that are ongoing or will be the case. I'll introduce some other elements of grammar in later videos that can get that time aspect a lot more narrowed down. So for right now, we're just going to look at the plain, polite forms of des in its present affirmative, past affirmative, present negative, and past negative. So now finally we have some example sentences I can throw at you guys. So let's look at the present affirmative and the present negative first. Specifically the plain forms of these, because this is most commonly used in media, like in television shows, right? The plain form of des is da. So let's take a really simple sentence here and break it down for you to show you how this copula works, and you can get a dose of some very simple sentence order. Sora wa aoi da. Sora wa aoi da. The sky is blue. Now let's make it a little bit more complex, and let's use the negative of this, right? 景色は綺麗じゃない or 景色は綺麗ではない The first sentence, 空は青いだ means the sky is blue, as I probably showed up with a little translation and some word association off to the side as I was saying it, right? And the latter sentences mean the scenery isn't pretty. Now these are just some really basic sentences, but we get to kind of see how they work, right? Now what to notice about these is the adjectives in the sentences. Aoi is an E adjective because it ends with the letter E, or whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called. And then the latter adjective, kirei, is a na adjective or a nominal adjective, which is just basically a noun that acts like an adjective. Kirei is actually kirei na, so it requires an adjective at the end of the sentence. You could say, just as a side note, sora wa aoi, and you'd be fine. But you couldn't say kashiki wa kirei. You could technically, but in terms of the way you'd sound when you're speaking it, you would sound more feminine, unless that's what you want to go for. That's just a little bit of side note for the speaking bit. But normally in written Japanese and in spoken Japanese, na adjectives like kirei usually take the copula at the end of the sentence. Now onto the past tense of this little copula here in the plain form. And for sake of simplicity, let's continue using this latter sentence. Keshiki wa kirei datta. The scenery was pretty. Keshiki wa kirei janakatta. Or keshiki wa kirei janakatta. The scenery was not pretty. Now, in order to get this into more of a polite form of speaking, all you have to do is this. If you want it to be present affirmative, you replace da with des. If you want it to be past affirmative, you replace datta with deshita. If you want it to be present negative, you replace dewa nai or janai with dewa arimasen or ja arimasen. And if you want it to be past negative, you replace dewa nakatta or janakatta with dewa arimasen deshita or ja arimasen deshita. Or if you want to get really spicy, there's another way you can do the negative forms. Now, the thing about dewanai and janai is that you turn those into adjectives in themselves. So at the end of those, they can actually take another des at the end of it. So you could have, in theory, as a sentence, keshiki wa kirei dewa nakatta desu, or keshiki wa kirei janai desu. Before I go, you might be a little bit confused as to whatever the heck this wa word is, and you're thinking, what the heck does this thing even do in this sentence? You get the word that sora is sky, aoi means blue, des means is, but you just have wa hanging here, seemingly doing nothing. At least to a beginner's eye, that is what it would seem. But Japanese intensively uses these funny little things called particles, which denote whether something is a subject of the sentence, an object, or a topic, or a recipient, etc., etc. It goes on and on and on, and I can do a whole video on that in and of itself, and I might in the future, for your sake, and because it's fun to talk about. So I'll cover particles in the next video, probably. But for now, know that the particle wa is for denoting the topic of the sentence. It doesn't really have a direct translation into English, but a lot of people treat it as meaning as for. So the sentence, Reshiki wa omoshiroi kyouka desu, literally would translate into English as for history, it is an interesting subject, right? There's a little bit of a discrepancy, but it's not really enough to make much of a difference. So just let that sit in your mind for a moment and kind of understand that you're approaching something that is communicating its ideas a lot differently than we do in English. But once again, it's nothing really to fret about, and I'll cover it. But whenever you're introducing a topic of a sentence, you use wa. I think that's all I have in terms of time today. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate it lots. Please come back and watch some more. I'm going to make some more in the future because I enjoy doing this kind of stuff and it's something I've wanted to do absolutely forever. So I'm going to be linking down in the description below some basic charts to hiragana and katakana so you can get a grip on how to at least read the basic aspects of the language. Do not worry about kanji. I'll introduce those one at a time as I go on, and I'll even leave some resources down below for JLPT resources that can teach you necessary kanji that you, as a Japanese learner, need to know. Once again, I will be leaving little resources down below as to which book I am following. There'll be a little Amazon link down below if you guys want to go and follow it yourselves. That'll be pretty cool. I will continue to elaborate upon other grammar subjects that were taught within the lessons of this book and the subsequent books that I have used. So, yeah. Please go on and check it out. If you have some leftover cash, I definitely recommend making the investment and getting a textbook or two. They certainly do help with studying and learning the language. So that'll be all. Next episode, expect some more grammar points, and I hope you enjoyed.